Hey guys, welcome back to another Cypher guide. This time it's going to be on Fracture and is going to showcase setups on B and A as well as first buys, and I'm even going to show how to attack on Fracture as well. So let's get right into it. So my first round buy suggestions on this map is like no different than most of the other maps. I suggest buying a cage and a trip, as well as a ghost or a frenzy. My preference again is a frenzy, but you can go with the ghost as well. And it gives you some util along with a good gun and can just help you get picks in a round, as well as have util. So starting out with my first A site setup, the cam is what I'm going to start with. You go up to the top of A and go into this corner, aim your cam around there, and jump though. And once you get it, you have a nice cam to see into main, see when they go out drop or even push rope. So it's a great cam. I usually pair this up with a specific one-way. There's actually two types of one-ways for A main. I'm going to show you the first one right now. So for this one-way, there's not really a setup for this, but you stand in between, right there, in between these lines. Aim your crosshair up here and destroy. So it's a one-way for when you can, for A main. You place a trip alongside it right next to the box so they can only break it from one side. And then since you have one spare trip, you want to be able to watch drop as well. So I suggest placing a trip something like this for when they push sight from drop. And the cage you want to place with this is up here. You want to place it like around here, in between, like around there. And from this, the way you play this setup is, if you notice they're pushing A main, first you activate the cage. Or you could play off a trip contact as well, and you have a nice one-way for easy picks. Just note, you cannot see people in the upper part of hall right there. You can only see them when they're down here. If you notice they're pushing drop first and they're about to hit your trip, activate the cage here and kill the person who hits your trip. So as I did mention before, there is actually two one-ways for A main. I'm going to show you guys that second one right now. So starting out with the cam, this one is actually a bit different. You stand in this corner right here, aim your crosshair underneath right there where drop is, and jump through. And you have a cam that can see into the entrance when they're pushing A main, as well as a little bit into drop. You can also see when they're pushing a rope, but it's not really why I use it. So the one way for this, you stand, if you see this box, you see this little line right here, you run into that and you aim underneath this little logo thing. And from that you get a one-way. The tripwire I place with this is placed on the fourth stair and goes something like this. They can only break this from this side, and it's actually still pretty hard for them to break it from this side. They have to get really close to actually break it. The trip I place with this, I usually like to watch drop as well, but I place a different one because I want to mix it up a little. I place this trip instead, and I just throw the cage right next to it for when they hit it. The way this one-way works, with the other one-way, you peek from here. But with this one, it's a bit different. I'll show you what I mean. If you notice they're pushing A main, activate the cage and you peek from here. And you can catch them off guard. Usually I play off a trip contact before I actually activate the cage. But I'm going to show you why you shouldn't peek from this side. Cage trigger. You activate the cage, they can easily see you when you peek from this side. So never peek from this side. If you notice they're pushing drop first and getting close to your trip, you activate cage triggered and just kill the person who hits your trip. So as Cypher, you want to mix up where you are, and on the last two setups you were on site, but this setup is in a different spot. So you start off by placing the same cam from the last setup, And then you place a trip right here. As well as a trip next to it right here. So whenever they enter site from A main, you throw a cage right here and you play off site. When you notice they're starting to push up, you activate this cage
triggered
and kill anyone who hits your trips. The reason this is good is because if there's a KO on the enemy team, if they throw a knife on site, literally your entire util is just gone if you're playing on site. So you want to have setups that are off site, and this is one of the best ones you can have for that. So this fourth setup is very similar to the last one, as you play in the same spot, but it's very helpful to know. So you start off by placing the same cam as last time. You can place the other one if you want. Both work for this setup. And then you place a trip on this box right here. And you get a really long trip for if they push this side or this side of sight. The second trip you place, you want to get ready for if they push stairs as well. So you place a trip right there, and if they run into it, good for you. You throw a cage right here and play in the same spot as last time. When you see them pushing on the site, you activate the cage
triggered
and kill anyone who pushes on the site, kill anyone who pushes on the stairs. The final and last setup I have on A site is a lot different than the other ones. It starts off by jumping up to drop, and this is where you're going to be placing your cam. You pull out your cam, aim in the middle right here, a little bit above that line, and jump through. And you have a cam that can see all of dish and all of above site, and a little bit on site itself as well. Then you pull out your trip, place a trip right here. This is a little bit weird of a trip, but it usually works since when people peek, they peek like this. And they'll normally hit your trip. So from there, you want to run here, and when the wall falls, you just want to place a trip next to door and go up rope. This is where you're going to be playing for the round. You also throw a cage right here. And when you see them pushing up dish or drop, or opening door, you activate the cage, kill anyone who hits your trip on door, kill anyone who hits your trip on drop. And that's how you play this setup. Starting out with B, I think B personally is Cypher's better site on this map. So if you're going to play anywhere, I suggest B. So I'm going to start off with my favorite setup here. You start off by standing around here. There's not a specific spot to stand, but this is where I like to do it. And then you just jump throw right here. You have a cam that can see into main, can see into arcade, and can see into tower. The trip I usually start off by placing. This is going to take a while to learn, just know that. You might want to go into a custom before you try to do this in real game. You aim around here, and you get a nice trip for B main. I always throw a cage with it around here. And then the second trip I place, you place a trip that's only shootable from one side. They can jump over it, yeah, but you're going to be watching it, so it shouldn't be a big deal. You throw a cage with it. And then the way you play this back here. If you notice they're pushing B main, you activate this cage, kill anyone who hits this trip. This trip works like 90 to 95% of the time, since most Cypher players don't do it, since it's really hard to place. If you notice they're pushing arcade, activate this cage, and kill anyone who hits that trip. Now, getting into the actual one-ways of this site. Starting out with the cam again, it's the same cam as last time since it's probably the best one for this setup. You throw a cam right there. And then you go into this corner right here, all the way into this corner. Aim your crosshair on this little white line right there and throw it. It's very easy to do one way. You want to place a good trip with this, so my suggestion is to aim around here. And you'll get a good trip that can place like that. And you want to play this from tower, so since you're going to be watching tower, I usually just throw a trip right there with a cage. And if you see they're pushing your tower first, you activate this cage before they hit the trip and kill them as soon as they hit the trip. If you notice they're pushing B main first, You wait till they activate your trip, activate the cage, and you have a great one way for B main. So the third setup is another offsite setup. So you stand in this corner since it uses a different cam. You aim on this tree right here and jump throw. And you have a nice cam that can see in the B main and a little bit of when they push tower. From there, you place a trip near this box right here, as well as a trip for when they push site like this. Then you throw a cage right here and play it right here. It is worth noting that whenever you're playing against a controller like Astra, Brim, they usually smoke off right here, which actually gives you an advantage. But when there is no controller, you play off of your cage. When you notice they push up, you activate this cage. And get easy kills. If you're smoked off, it's even better, because you can just play in the smoke when they hit your trip, get a kill, and then back up. And you can play for retake with some kills already. So the last and final setup I know on Fracture B site goes back to the initial cam I showed you guys, which is this one, and then uses a trip that goes right here. This is a very simple setup, but if you're confident in your aim, I would recommend doing this because you can capitalize off your trips very well. Then you place a cage right here too after you get that tower trip. And then when you notice they're pushing up B main, if they're pushing it up first, activate this cage, tell the person who hits your trip. If they're pushing tower first, activate this, and you get an easy kill. And then you can capitalize off your kills after, maybe get an ace, who knows, you can just capitalize off of those initial 2 kills or 1 kill. So when you're pushing A site on Fracture, I always recommend putting your flank trip on main side, as most of the time when the enemies will flank, they'll flank from main. So you have 2 options for flank trips. The first one, ever since the Cypher buff came out, you can now place a trip like this for flank, and it gives you earlier info on when they're actually flanking. So the second trip you have as an option is that tells you at a later time, but if you actually want to watch this trip, then I recommend doing this trip over this one to watch instead. So when you actually start pushing A main though, there's not very much you can do up to around here. If you want to place a second trip, your second trip right here, you can, as you can watch the door if they decide to push here later on in the round. But when you actually start getting up to here is where you start using the rest of your util. I usually just place a cam right here, right off the bat, to see where they are and see if they're pushing and if they're close. And then when I actually want to push on the side, I just throw a cage right here, and you give your team more space on site to have control. If you want a different trip besides tree for post plant, you can place a trip right here, and you have a trip for when they push site. I usually just throw a cage whenever I do that, and then watch, and when they push up, cage, and kill anyone who hits the trip in post plant. So for B site, when attacking, there's 2 trips you can place. I still recommend placing them on main side over arcade side. So when the first option you have is just placing a trip, something simple, just like right there. Or you can place another trip along here that's harder to see, like that. Both work really well. But when you actually start pushing up on the site, I recommend as soon as the wall falls, run into this corner, pull out your cam, and cam. You can see close, like anywhere on site really. You can see if someone's pushing up right away, and you can just mark them, and gives early info that can help your team out. When you actually start pushing up on the site, there's not really a lot you can do. But I do say you should throw a cage maybe like that, so you can just rotate on the site in a really easy way. As for post plant, if your team decided to plant back here, or just anywhere around here, you should place a trip either here or here. If they place like if they plant a little bit further back like there, I would place a trip like right here for post plant. I almost always suggest play tower when you do this. Just have a cage like that, and once you see them pushing on the site with your cam here,
cage triggered.
Activate the cage, and whatever trip you use, you can peek and get a kill off of. Thank you everyone for watching this Cypher guide on Fracture. I hope you enjoyed all the setups and one ways that I showed today. If you did, consider subscribing and liking on this video, as I'm going to be grinding the next couple of weeks, trying to improve my content, and I would love to see you there with the process. If you guys have any map suggestions for the next Cypher guide, consider commenting below the map, and I'll consider that as my next map. Hope everyone has a good day, and thank you for watching.